Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Anitangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste, namaskar. Good morning, everyone. I'm always grateful to be able to come and speak at the Vedanta Society in New York. I always feel at home when I'm in a Vedanta Society. I'll tell you a quick story. A number of years ago, a variety of very stressful things were happening in my life. And I don't think I realized how stressful they were because I was just sort of putting them aside and not thinking about them. And I had an occasion to stop by the Vedanta Society by Washington, D.C., which is not too far from where I live, and was waiting for a friend. And so I went inside the chapel, and I saw the image there of Thakur, and I just burst into tears. And I sat there for a while, and I let the energy and the atmosphere of that place enfold me and comfort me. And I feel that whenever I come into a Vedanta center, this is home, right? This is a place where we all feel loved. I'd like to tell you a little bit of a funny story too, because I'm speaking about Mahatma Gandhi today. My wife and I are both professors, and there's this thing that we see students sometimes do, and have to admit we've probably done it a couple of times ourselves. When you need to write a paper about something and it's not quite in your area of expertise, so you manage to sort of maneuver the paper in such a way that it comes back to something you feel more confident about. So we have an expression for that in our home called getting Gandhi on the train. And what does that mean? So this is from my wife's childhood or her youth, growing up in India. They have these big all-India exams that everyone has to take, right? And a little bit like our SATs here in America. But these are written exams, essays. And so there was this one year, one of these exams was going to be taken, and the government announced it was going to be on one of two possible topics: Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian railway system. So it was going to be one of those. So the idea was you should study both of those topics very well and be ready to write your exam. Well, a classmate of my wife decided to sort of make a bet, make a bit of a wager, take a gamble. And he spent all of his time studying the Indian railway system. There was at least a 50% chance, right, that it would be that would be the question. So the day of the exam comes, and the question is Mahatma Gandhi. So what does he do? So he starts his essay. Mahatma Gandhi was a great man. He was the father of our nation. He traveled all throughout the country, meeting people. And whenever he traveled, he used the Indian railway system. And then the rest of the essay was about the Indian railway system. So getting Gandhi on the train, right? So today, maybe you could say I'm getting Gandhi on the train of Vedanta. But I think I have maybe a little stronger case, I hope, than the student who was writing about the railway system. So today I'd like to speak about Vedanta in the thought of Mahatma Gandhi. I feel this is an especially appropriate topic to discuss at this time, given that this month marks Gandhiji's 150th birth anniversary, which occurred on October 2nd. I'd like to begin my remarks by noting that I'm aware that Gandhi is a controversial figure for many, even today, more than 70 years after his assassination on the 30th of January, 1948. He is widely revered in the Western world, where he has inspired other admired figures like Martin Luther King Jr., who similarly dedicated their lives to the causes of social justice and human dignity. He has recently become a controversial figure in South Africa due to renewed scrutiny of his views on the relationship between the Indian community and the indigenous peoples of that country. He's long been controversial in India, where, while being admired by many, he's also criticized for various decisions and pronouncements which he made, especially in connection with the partition of India and Pakistan, an event which resulted in the deaths of possibly as many as 2 million people, and the displacement of 14 million more, including, I would note, my mother-in-law and her family, as well as many of my friends and close acquaintances in the Bengali community. I do not intend to explore in my remarks today the areas in which Gandhi can be criticized. Other people are doing that, right? That's not my goal today. I would simply like to note at the outset that Gandhi was an imperfect human being, a claim which he would no doubt be the first to agree, admitting quite openly, as he did in his writings, to a great variety of personal shortcomings, sometimes with a brutal honesty which sometimes makes for an uncomfortable reading experience, as some of my students can attest. I've had the good fortune to get to know members of Mahatma Gandhi's family who similarly attest both to his greatness and to his all-too-human fallibility. The point I wish to make here at the start is precisely this, that Gandhi was both a great soul, a Mahatma in the true sense, and an imperfect human being, subject to a range of criticisms. One can admire the genuine spiritual greatness in another person without having to believe that person was perfect and never made a mistake. Unfortunately, in our increasingly polarized world, if one utters even a word of criticism toward a beloved figure, one is immediately taken to be on the other side, whatever that may mean, from that figure's followers. And if one has admiration for a particular figure, it's assumed that one cannot tolerate any criticism of that figure whatsoever. All sense of nuance is being lost as humanity divides itself into warring ideological camps. But this division, I want to suggest, is in fact an illusion. Humanity is one, the world is one. This is one of the core teachings of Vedanta. It is possible to use our viveka, use our discernment when we are looking at any great figure. Even Nathuram Godse, the man who murdered Mahatma Gandhi, acknowledged the depths of Gandhi's spiritual greatness, reverently touching his feet in the ancient Hindu gesture of respect, before brutally assassinating him. The contradiction between these two almost simultaneous acts well illustrates the conflicted feelings that many in India have for this historically important figure. So I just want to say from the outset, I know that there are conversations in which Gandhi is polarizing. My intent is not to really engage with any of that. I'm interested in the influence of Vedanta on the thought of Mahatma Gandhi, which is considerable. In fact, it is extensive and profound, as I hope to show today. It's of course very understandable that this should be the case. Gandhi was a lifelong adherent of the Vaishnava tradition of Hinduism, growing up in a devout Gujarati Vaishnava family. He was also deeply pluralistic and open to influences from a variety of spiritual traditions, which is, of course, a trait of Indian culture tracing back to ancient times, to the teaching of the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Varanti. The real is one, the wise speak of it in many ways. In addition to Vaishnava Hinduism, he was deeply influenced by the Jain tradition, an influence to which we shall have an occasion to return shortly. Rajchandra Mehta, founder of the Jain Kavi Panth tradition, was a very dear friend of Gandhi's. His influence on Gandhi was so profound that he's often referred to as Gandhi's guru. Later on in life, Gandhi would also be deeply moved by the New Testament and by the Sermon on the Mount in particular, upon which Swami Prabhavananda, founder of the Vedanta Society of California, would eventually write a famous commentary published under the title The Sermon on the Mount According to Vedanta. It's probably in the bookstore here, I would imagine. The chief source, however, to which Gandhi refers again and again throughout his many writings is the Bhagavad Gita. Gandhi called the Gita his dictionary of daily reference. The Bhagavad Gita is, of course, a central Vaishnava text, but it is also a central source for Vedanta as part of the Prasthanatraya, the triple foundation of Vedanta, alongside the Brahma Sutras and the Upanishads. Gandhi gave a series of lectures on this important Hindu text, which was published in 1946 as a book under the title The Bhagavad Gita According to Gandhi. In addition to the Vedantic influences he received from his upbringing, as well as his close and deep reading of the Gita, Gandhi was also a great admirer of both Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. The imprint of the thought of both of these major figures and shapers of the modern Vedanta movement can be clearly discerned in his works. Indeed, Gandhi wrote the following of Sri Ramakrishna. The story of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa's life is a story of religion and practice. His life enables us to see God face to face. No one can read the story of his life without being convinced that God alone is real and that all else is an illusion. Sri Ramakrishna was a living embodiment of godliness. His sayings are not those of a mere learned man, but they are pages from the book of life. They are revelations of his own experiences. They therefore leave the reader an impression which he cannot resist. In this age of skepticism, Ramakrishna represents an example of a bright and living faith which gives solace to thousands of men and women who would otherwise have remained without spiritual light. Ramakrishna's life was an object lesson in ahimsa. His love knew no limits, geographical or otherwise. May his divine love be an inspiration to all. So this is Gandhi speaking about Sri Ramakrishna. Regarding Swami Vivekananda, Gandhi actually tried to visit Swamiji in 1902 when the Indian National Congress was holding its annual meeting in Calcutta. Gandhi was 32 years old at the time, while Swamiji, only 39, was tragically on his deathbed and was unable to receive visitors. One would very much like to have access to the alternative reality where these two figures met and managed to speak with one another. Were such a conversation to have occurred and to have been recorded, the resulting document would certainly be a source of enlightenment for the rest of humanity. The Vedantic influences on Gandhi's thought are so extensive that one could likely write a book enumerating and exploring them. I found Gandhi's thought echoing that of Thakur and Swamiji most clearly, though, in three particular areas: his commitment to serving the poor, his religious pluralism, and his rejection of prejudice based on birth caste or jati. So first, on serving the poor. The idea of karma yoga involving seva, or selfless service, as a path to God realization is one of the most distinctive elements emphasized by Swami Vivekananda throughout his life. This idea was first sparked in Swamiji's mind when, as the young Narendranath Datta and disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he heard his master make the statement, Jiva Shiva. In other words, the jivas, or living beings, are one with Shiva, with God. All souls are divine. Service to any living being is therefore service to God. Daridra Narayan, or God in the form of the poor, thus became a central ideal for Vivekananda, who later wrote, "Blessed are they whose bodies get destroyed in the service of others." Wealth and even life itself, the sage always holds ready for the service of others. In this evanescent world where everything is falling to pieces, we have to make the highest use of what time we have, says the bhakta, or devotee, and the highest use of life is to hold it at the service of all beings. Swamiji also wrote, however, that one should offer everything you have unto the service of the Lord. But there's no contradiction between these statements. Because of the all-pervasive presence of Brahman dwelling within all beings, because the jiva is Shiva, a practitioner of Vedanta does not distinguish, according to Vivekananda, between the service of the Lord and the service of others. The service of the Lord is the service of others, and the service of others is the service of the Lord. In Swamiji's words, "They worship me best who worship my worshippers. These are all my children, and your privilege is to serve them," is the teaching of Hindu scriptures. Swamiji also went on to say that this path of service is open to those who have no belief in a personal God, that the pure act of serving the other, of giving up ego and living as the servant of others, is sufficient to purify the soul, purify the mind, and lead us to liberation. Swami Vivekananda's vision of seva is not a vision of charity. The ideal of charity tends to assume class distinctions among different groups of human beings based on material wealth. It encourages the wealthy to aid the less fortunate out of the goodness of their hearts, an act which can be done out of pride and with a sense of moral superiority based on the idea that one has earned one's wealth, and that if others are not similarly fortunate, it must be due to some moral failing or flaw. This is something that Vivekananda strongly rejects. He says, quote, "Do not stand on a high pedestal and take 5 cents in your hand and say, 'Here, my poor man,' but be grateful that the poor man is there, so that by making a gift to him, you are able to help yourself. It is not the receiver that is blessed, but it is the giver. Be thankful that you are allowed to exercise your power of benevolence and mercy in the world, and thus become pure and perfect. The less fortunate, so-called less fortunate, are God in human form, offering us an opportunity to serve and thereby realize our own divine potential." In terms of what kind of service specifically is most helpful to the poor, Swamiji offers again not a vision of charity, which tends to assume that contemporary disparities of wealth are a natural feature of society and will always exist. Swamiji offers a more radical vision of enabling the self-empowerment of the poor, largely through education. He writes, quote, "The only service to be done for our lower classes is to give them education, to develop their lost individuality. That is the great task between our people and princes. Up to now, nothing has been done in that direction. Priest power and foreign conquest have trodden them down for centuries, and at last the poor of India have forgotten that they are human beings. They are to be given ideas. Their eyes are to be opened to what is going on in the world around them, and then they will work out their own salvation. Every nation, every man, and every woman must work out their own salvation. Give them ideas. That is the only help they require, and then the rest must follow as the effect. This emphasis on self-empowerment, which Gandhi would convey with his concept of Swaraj, or self-rule, is one of the strongest links between the thought of these two figures. Seva, again, for Vivekananda, is not subservient to, much less a diversion from, the spiritual path. It is the spiritual path, in a concrete manifestation that is no less valuable than the study of the scriptures, the practice of meditation, or devotional worship. And it is also an expression of spiritual liberation, not to be seen so much in a linear cause and effect manner, but in a dialectical fashion, as both a means and embodiment. This is in keeping with the broader Vedantic ideal that the ethical virtues are, for those of us still on the path to realization, a means toward that realization. But for those who have attained realization, they're simply the spontaneous reflection of that realization. A sadhak, one who's on the spiritual path, serves in order to attain realization. A realized being serves for the sheer joy of serving. The most obvious embodiment of Vivekananda's ideal of seva, on which he has had the clearest and most direct influence, is in the service work that is carried out by the sannyasis and sannyasinis of the Ramakrishna order and their lay supporters. I would like to argue, though, that there's also a direct line of continuity from Swami Vivekananda's ideal and Gandhi's constructive program, to the extent that Gandhi could well be regarded as a practical Vedantin of the Vivekananda school of thought. The constructive program is the title of an essay by Mahatma Gandhi, which was first published in 1941, with the revised enlarged edition appearing in 1945. In this essay, Gandhi defines the constructive program as the construction of Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, by truthful and nonviolent means. More than a mere political program for Indian independence from British rule, however, the constructive program, as Gandhi presents it, involves a complete transformation of Indian society, through peaceful means, into a just or dharmic social order that is characterized by independence, not only in a conventional political sense, although it includes such independence, but in a spiritual sense as well. It is a holistic program for the transformation of not only the nation, but of the communities and the individuals that constitute it. One can see Gandhi's constructive program as an extension of Swamiji's spiritual ideal, which is aimed mainly at the individual, to the whole society. True independence, according to Gandhi's thought, is never exclusive. It is therefore wholly compatible with interdependence, within or without. As a spiritual ideal, it also cannot, at least at the societal level, be identified with any particular concrete embodiment of it, but can only be approached asymptotically. In Gandhi's words, quote, "Practice will always fall short of the theory, even as the drawn line falls short of the theoretical line of Euclid." That was always, I thought, the most fascinating thing that I learned in geometry class. You draw a line, but it's not really a line, right? It's an approximation of a line. Therefore, independence will be complete only to the extent of our approach in practice to truth and nonviolence, satya and ahimsa. These twin ideals of satya and ahimsa are indispensable to the goal and to one another. This is very close in sensibility to Swami Vivekananda's teaching in regard to karma yoga that, quote, "This world is like a dog's curly tail, and people have been striving to straighten it out for hundreds of years, but when they let it go, it's curled up again." This does not mean that specific concrete goals are not to be achieved as part of the process of the unfoldment of the higher ideal. Indeed, Gandhi's constructive program essay consists largely of an outline of such concrete goals and practical suggestions for their achievement. The idea is that even as specific problems are solved, it is in the nature of the material world that so long as we inhabit it, so long as we inhabit samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, we will be involved in problem solving. I once heard Swami Atmarupananda at a gathering in Mumbai refer to this, and he said, life is problem solving. It's a great definition, I think, of life. Problems exist in order to be solved, in order to give us spiritual exercise, as it were, that will enable us to realize our potential divinity. As Swamiji says, quote, "This world is a grand moral gymnasium. wherein we have all to take exercise so as to become stronger and stronger spiritually. Moving now to religious pluralism. The first concrete goal that Gandhi outlines is communal unity. Here we see a particularly strong resonance with the Vedantic teachings of both Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda on the harmony of religions, or Dharma Samanvaya. As Gandhi writes, everybody is agreed about the necessity of this communal unity, but everybody does not know that unity does not mean political unity, which may be imposed. It means an unbreakable heart unity. The first thing essential for achieving such unity is for every one of us, whatever our religion may be, to represent in his own person, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Zoroastrian, Jew, etc. He has to feel his identity with every one of the millions of the inhabitants of Hindustan. In order to realize this, we will all cultivate a personal friendship with persons representing faiths other than our own. In such a happy state of things, there would be no disgraceful cry at the stations, such as Hindu water and Muslim water, or Hindu tea and Muslim tea. This is a reference to the fact that in Gandhi's time, Hindus and Muslims drank from segregated wells and tea stalls. There would be no separate rooms or spots for Hindus and non-Hindus in schools and colleges. No communal schools, colleges, and hospitals. The beginning of such a revolution has to be made without any political motive behind the correct conduct. Political unity will be its natural fruit. Those of you who know India well or follow Indian politics will know that this is actually quite different in many ways from the direction India actually took after its independence. It's significant that the communal unity that Gandhi advocates is not merely a political stance. It is not vote bank politics. Gandhi's ideal is rather a sincere embrace of the religious other from which political unity would naturally flow. It is therefore not unlike the ideal that Vivekananda outlines in his various discourses on the world's religions, and to which he refers as universal religion. In the effort to realize this ideal, Vivekananda rejects superficial notions of mere tolerance in favor of the unbreakable heart unity of which Gandhi writes. For although tolerance is certainly preferable to intolerance, it falls far short of the holistic Vedantic ideal. And I've said many times to many audiences, I often will ask my students, if you went back to your dormitory today and your roommate said, "I tolerate you," how would you feel, right? Would that be a compliment? If you went home today, if you would go home to your family and talk to your husband or wife or children and they said, "I tolerate you," would you feel happy? Better than not being tolerated, but that's not a very high bar, right? Swami Vivekananda, rejecting both tolerance and exclusion, writes, "Our watchword then will be acceptance and not exclusion. Not only toleration, for so-called toleration is often blasphemy, and I do not believe in it. I believe in acceptance. Why should I tolerate? Toleration means that I think you are wrong and I'm just allowing you to live." Right? Powerful language that Swami Vivekananda is using here. He continues, "Is it not a blasphemy to think that you and I are allowing others to live? I accept all religions that were in the past and worship with them all. I worship God with every one of them in whatever form they worship him. I shall go to the mosque of the Muslim. I shall enter the Christian's church and kneel before the crucifix. I shall enter the Buddhist temple where I shall take refuge in Buddha and in his law. I shall go into the forest and sit down in meditation with the Hindu, who is trying to see the light which enlightens the heart of everyone. Not only shall I do all these, but I shall keep my heart open for all that may come in the future. Is God's book finished, or is it still a continuous revelation going on? It is a marvelous book, these spiritual revelations of the world. The Bible, the Vedas, the Quran, and all other sacred books are but so many pages, and an infinite number of pages remain yet to be unfolded. I would leave it open for all of them. We stand in the present, but open ourselves to the infinite future. We take in all that has been in the past, enjoy the light of the present, and open every window of the heart for all that will come in the future. Salutation to all the prophets of the past, to all the great ones of the present, and to all that are to come in the future." That was a fairly lengthy quote from Swami Vivekananda, but I think it conveys his ideal extremely well. One of the things I particularly admire and enjoy about Swamiji's writings is that this emphasis on the future, right? He's not simply looking back to the past or trying to solve present problems. He has a very expansive vision. I've always been very fond of science fiction, as some of you know, and who's to say what religions there will be 1,000 years from now, right? If we still have human beings 1,000 years from now, what will people be believing and doing? How will technology transform that? One of my former students who works for Google now is here, and maybe when we all have chips in our brains, that will shape our religious sensibility in some profound fashion. Who knows what is going to happen? And Swamiji is saying, yes, we acknowledge and honor all of that. Gandhi, along similar lines, writes, quote, "Religions are different roads converging upon the same point. What does it matter that we take different roads so long as we reach the same goal? In reality, there are as many religions as there are individuals." That's, by the way, probably my own personal favorite Gandhi quote. We all have our own worldview and our own understanding. "I believe in the fundamental truth of all great religions of the world. I believe that they're all God-given, and I believe that they were necessary for the people to whom these religions were revealed. And I believe that if only we could, all of us, read the scriptures of different faiths from the standpoint of the followers of those faiths, we should find that they were at bottom all one and were all helpful to one another." And both Vivekananda and Gandhi are, of course, echoing the words of Sri Ramakrishna, who said, quote, "I have practiced all religions, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and I've also followed the paths of the different Hindu sects. I've found that it is the same God toward whom all are directing their steps, though along different paths. He who is called Krishna is also called Shiva and bears the name of the primal energy, Jesus, and Allah as well, the same Rama with 1,000 names. God can be realized through all paths. All religions are true. The important thing is to reach the roof. You can reach it by stone stairs, or by wooden stairs, or by bamboo steps, or by a rope. You can also climb up a bamboo pole. Each religion is only a path leading to God, as rivers come from different directions and ultimately become one in the one ocean. All religions and all paths call upon their followers to pray to one and the same God. Therefore, one should not show disrespect to any religion or religious opinion." Very much in the spirit of Ramakrishna, Gandhi's pluralism was itself pluralistic. That is, in the very act of articulating his view that many religions and philosophies are able to express the truth and to take their sincere practitioners ever closer to the realization of their potential divinity, he drew upon multiple traditions. Specifically, he drew upon the Jain philosophy of Anekantavad, which I mentioned in the presentation that I gave here in June on Vedanta and Jainism. While Gandhi did embrace in many of his writings Advaita philosophy, he also spoke and wrote frequently of a personal God, distinct from humanity and from the rest of the universe, and of the importance of discerning and behaving in accordance with this God's will, and of the actions of God as an agent in human history. Theistic concepts much more in line with Vaishnava Dvaita philosophy or with Abrahamic monotheism than with the ultimately impersonal and formless or nirguna Brahman of Advaita Vedanta. In early 1926 or late 1925, this apparent inconsistency in his thought was pointed out by a reader of Gandhi's English-language newspaper, Young India, in a letter to the editor. Gandhi's response to this letter in the January 21st, 1926 issue reveals the depth of his thought to Jainism. Quote, "I am an Advaitist, and yet I can support Dvaitism or dualism. The world is changing every moment and is therefore unreal. It has no permanent existence." That's the Advaita side. "But though it is constantly changing, it has a something about it which persists, and it is therefore to that extent real. I have therefore no objection to calling it real and unreal, and thus being called an Anekantavadi or Syadvadi. Syadvada is the Jain doctrine that claims our true Syat, that is, in a certain sense, or from a certain point of view, rather than being absolutely true or false." Gandhi continues, "But my Syadvada is not the Syadvada of the learned. It is peculiarly my own. I cannot engage in a debate with them. It has been my experience that I am always true from my point of view, and am often wrong from the point of view of my honest critics. I know that we are both right from our respective points of view, and this knowledge saves me from attributing motives to my opponents or critics. The 7 blind men who gave 7 different descriptions of the elephant were all right from their respective points of view, and wrong from the point of view of one another, and right and wrong from the point of view of the man who knew the elephant. I very much like this doctrine of the manyness of reality. It is this doctrine that has taught me to judge a Muslim from his own standpoint and a Christian from his. Formerly, I used to resent the ignorance of my opponents. Today, I can love them because I'm gifted with the eye to see myself as others see me, and vice versa. I want to take the whole world in the embrace of my love. My Anekantavad is the result of the twin doctrine of Satya and Ahimsa, truth and nonviolence. For Gandhi, again, openness to the truths of others is not merely a matter of political expediency, or what we might today call political correctness. It stems from the core nature of existence, and is an application of the ancient yogic values of truth and nonviolence. Next, on eliminating casteism. After communal unity, the second goal Gandhi outlines is the removal of untouchability, and by extension of caste prejudice in general, which he calls, quote, a blot and curse upon Hinduism. Here again he echoes Swami Vivekananda, who was quite clear and characteristically blunt in his rejection of caste and untouchability, which interfered with human beings' ability to see God in one another. Swamiji fiercely ridiculed what he called the don't-touchism of the Hinduism of his time, deriding it as kitchen religion for its emphasis on rules regarding dining between the members of different castes. And I have to say here, what I'm about to quote is really quite blunt, but these are the words of Swami Vivekananda. The present religion of the Hindus is neither the path of knowledge or reason. It is don't-touchism. Don't touch me, don't touch me. That exhausts its description. Don't-touchism is a form of mental disease. Beware. All expansion is life. All contraction is death. All love is expansion. All selfishness is contraction. Love is therefore the only law of life. See that you do not lose your lives in this dire irreligion of don't-touchism. Must the teaching, Atmavat Sarvabhuteshu, looking upon all beings as your own self, be confined to books alone? How will they grant salvation who cannot feed a hungry mouth with a crumb of bread? How will those who become impure at the mere breath of others purify others? Finally, as we have already seen, Vivekananda viewed the most vital service that could be rendered to the poor of India as education, which could enable them to empower themselves, or in his words, work out their own salvation. Here too, there's a direct line of continuity between Gandhi's thought and Swami Vivekananda's. Recall that Swami Vivekananda specifically links education with making the poor aware of their situation of political oppression. The particular kind of education he has in mind is one which will allow them to, quote, develop their lost individuality. This is what we would call in contemporary circles raising consciousness, right? Raising awareness about the situation one is in. Gandhi, again echoing Vivekananda, says that the education that he has in mind, although including literary education, or education in the conventional sense, will consist primarily of liberating knowledge that will enable the people to understand their situation and lift themselves above it. Quote, the villagers know nothing of foreign rule and its evils. What little knowledge they have picked up fills them with the awe the foreigner inspires. The result is the dread and hatred of the foreigner and his rule. They do not know how to get rid of it. They do not know that the foreigner's presence is due to their own weaknesses and their ignorance of the power they possess to rid themselves of the foreign rule. My adult education means, therefore, first, true political education of the adult by word of mouth. So in conclusion, in celebration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, we ought to acknowledge the profound debt his thought process owes to Vedanta, and of course to Jainism and to various systems of thought on which he drew, putting his spirit of pluralism into action. We began today by acknowledging that Gandhi himself was an imperfect human being, as are we all, so long as we are in the process of unfolding our as yet unrealized divine potential. This ideal of a divine potential, realized by Sri Ramakrishna and proclaimed to the world by Swami Vivekananda, was the very ideal which Gandhi sought to manifest in the social and political realms. It is an ideal that we still seek to realize today, not in the utopian belief that the world, the curly tail of the dog, can ever be made to conform fully to our limited ideas of perfection, but in the belief that, as Swamiji has taught, the very effort to do so may itself serve to draw us, each individually, nearer to the ideal, even as we resolve specific concrete problems in the world, utilizing our problems like the exercise equipment in the grand moral gymnasium of life. What Thakur, Swamiji, and Mahatma Gandhi all encourage us to do is to realize that in the words of the Maha Upanishad, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, The world is one family. In other words, the world is a mirror of our own consciousness. We cannot transform the world without transforming our consciousness. And we cannot transform our consciousness without transforming the world. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. Let us therefore live lives of compassion, seeing ourselves in others and others in ourselves. In the words of Swami Vivekananda, quote, "Do not injure another. Love everyone as your own self, because the whole universe is one. In injuring another, I am injuring myself. In loving another, I am loving myself." This is the core message of Mahatma Gandhi and the message of Vedanta. Thank you all very much.